Then you read consciousness. You read the consciousness of life that it is alive, but still no further away, no endlessness of life. How clearly he thought and how well he expressed what he thought. From regarding me curiously to he turned his head and glanced out over the leaden sea windward to windward. A bleakness came into his eyes, and the lines of his mouth grew severe and harsh. He was evidently in a pessimistic mood. Then, to what end, he demanded abruptly, turning back to me, if I am immortal, why? This is a quote, a section from the book The Sea Wolf, written by Jack London. It is one of those novels, one of the few novels that have really, in the long term, made an impact. And I think it's an excellent book that starts with a contrast between two characters. You have this Wolf Larson character, who is the head of a whaling ship, and then he is contrasted by the narrator, who's this guy by the name of Humphrey, who's a soft and scripted man. The reason why I bring this book up is that this contrast in the beginning is such an excellent. I'm going to sneeze. Allergy
Bless,
season, great.
bless you.
Yeah, this contrast in the beginning is such an excellent description of this Wolf Larson character as a man of both learned capabilities and physical, perhaps brutality is not so distant from the correct definition. And so, if you're looking for a novel to read, even though the summer heat is coming on, uh, there's The Sea Wolf by Jack London. It's one I highly recommend. However, this is not only a podcast about how we think about things, it's about a little bit more when it comes to the capability of violence, gun culture, and how we think about violence itself. With that, today we are joined by a guest who I am long been looking forward to having a conversation with. Would you introduce yourself?
What's up, everybody? My name's Charles Robeson. Everybody calls me Chuck. I am one of two owners of All Skill No Luck. It's allskillnoluck.com and Raid Skateboards or RaidSB.com. And I am so stoked to be here talking to my buddy.
Thank you, bud. Thank you very much. All right, so before we get too far into it, we'll make sure this one comes up real quick. If you're on YouTube, you'll see it on the screen right now. We announced recently that we're opening up a newsletter called the Redacted Dead Drop. If we well this page, let's see if I can make this look a little bit better. There you go. That should help. The We decided to launch a newsletter for a couple reasons. One, it just seems like a good idea, especially in this age of censorship. That tends to be the argument that people make, but also we want to have ways of getting a hold of you. And then on top of that, we are currently running a pre-order on our subdued shirts and our inverted shirts. We're going to try to get as many of those out as we can because it's probably the last time you're going to see those for the year. And there's a whole lot going into this too, because in while all of this is going on, whether or not you've followed us on social media, whether or not you're gonna or you've seen us before, if you're signed up for the Dead Drop, we're entering you for a giveaway for a tour knife, which is not the Vandal. This one's the Mullet, um, which has turned out to be a fantastic belt knife. But so we're doing a knife giveaway. In addition to that, if you make any order that includes a pre-order of one of our shirts, will be will include free entries for that giveaway. We have a social media post on Instagram that will where you can enter in for free, and then if you sign up for the Dead Drop, which is going to be the best way we're going to be able to get special event information out to you. That all anyone who's on there also gets entries into the giveaway. But today's show isn't really about free stuff. Well, maybe it's going to be about free stuff. I don't know, really. But let's get back to the show. I'm gonna have to figure out how to blow my nose and clear out this morning allergy smell because that's just gonna kill me.
Gotta
Um,
hit the neti pot.
yeah. Then you've got like the surgical version of it, the neti
Oh, yeah.
pot. You know what? That's actually kind of a funny subject. I wonder how much of the neti pot is just like a relic of the past. Like I've met many
Yeah.
people who have no idea what it is.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, I have one, but it's like a cheap little plastic one that works. And my girlfriend has one. She's from Eastern Europe, but hers is like this nice ceramic, like looking teapot variant of it that's old as shit.
The family heirloom is a nose cleaning project.
Exactly.
It's like one of those Japanese little teapots that once it gets cracked, they put it back together with gold, and you're like,
Yeah.
yes, this is the family heirloom. It's worth $20,000.
And you shove it in your nose? That's correct.
And yep, and it's used when the flowers bloom and your eyes go ouchie ouchie and your nose go I can't smell no more.
Yeah, I can't take it.
Yeah, but well, that's that. I'm sure there's an interesting story that can come out of that in the future. But so all skill no luck as far as a gear company sells. Like I think I recently ended up with one of your hoodies. That's kind of your Baja style hoodies,
The drug rugs
the drug
was
rugs,
the,
just in time
the
for
one.
summer.
Yeah.
But I think I just the one thing I found interesting about it is, well, let me put it this way. As far as a manufacturing goes, I think you guys make one of the best flannels that's in the market right now because I know flannels have been around for a while, and that's going to be complimentary. But also so the viewership knows that you guys did send me to. They're just sturdy. They're sturdy and robust and buttoned. I don't like snapped shirts, so that's really neat. Um, I'm not gonna pause this. I'm gonna keep this recording. Usually because we're pretty open. But I am actually gonna go find a way to clear out my face. Otherwise, I'm gonna be suffering this entire time. So I'll be back
Yeah.
in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, we're back. That was disappointing, but we're actually back. It was. It's just. You wake up in the morning and then you can't breathe.
Yeah. I went through that a couple weeks ago.
Oh, dude. Story time. We went to a national park that was experiencing a super bloom.
Oh yeah.
And it was like pollinating the world while
Mhm.
we got there. And it was about 24 hours of solid misery for me. I've never had like your nose kind of allergies turn into like, yeah, my lungs burn. We probably shouldn't be here right now. But hey, so give me a little rundown on how both Raid and All Skill No Luck began.
Wow. Okay. So all skill no luck. We'll start with them because that's the older side of the business. So all skill no luck started. My business partner Aaron, he started all skill no luck 2015. Prior to that, he and I knew each other from another company we worked at in Oceanside. I was on their training team, and Aaron was part of their like executive staff, if you will. That company went to shit for numerous reasons. It had nothing to do with like decisions that he and I were making. We weren't in like, well, he was involved at a higher level, but he wasn't at like the top of that. So there were people above him that made some decisions that we thought were going to be for the benefit of the company, but then things ended up going a different way. And so basically everybody left. I went full time into contracting. I was training and contracting a little bit at the time, but I just went full into doing EP and still doing training for the same company I was working for, and then I was helping him with like content and photos and ideas and stuff, but I wasn't like in official capacity part of the company. That didn't happen until 2020, and then in 2019, at the end of 2018, actually, I left contracting. I was gone all the time. I'd come back from a trip, run a class. The class would finish, and then I'd have 2 weeks off before the next class, and then I would get put on a detail, and I'm on tour in Mexico, or I'm in Ukraine, or I'm in Colombia, or whatever, and then I come back and run another class, and so I had no time for my kids. I had no time for anything, so I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I left that, got a job working for a gear design company here in San Diego. They got bought out by a new um, a new owner, I guess. That didn't go well, and so I ended up leaving there, and I didn't know what to do. So I was just like, well, I'll just keep, doing some freelance design and whatnot, and I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll get back into contracting or training or whatever. I don't know. And so as all these things are happening, and especially in 2019, 2018, 2019, I'd always wanted to design a skateboard. I grew up skateboarding. I love skateboarding. So I did design one, and I had like 25 made, but I hadn't shared that with anybody yet. And so Aaron calls me one day. He's like, "Hey, dude, what's up with your skateboard design?" Because I had been sharing with him and showing him stuff. And I was like, "Oh, I'm waiting for them to come. They haven't. I don't know when they're going to be here yet." And he was like, "Dude, you should probably just push that out because nobody's ever done anything like that, and it would suck for somebody to like, beat you to the punch, so to speak, because it wouldn't be like they were copying me because nobody knew what I was doing, and I couldn't copy anybody because I nobody knew what I was doing." And so I was like, "Yeah, you're right." So I made up a digital like mock-up of the deck and posted it, and people went nuts for it, and I was like super surprised. I was like, "Holy cow, this is pretty awesome!" Like I didn't think there'd be this much interest in it. And then lo and behold, the decks showed up the next day. So I was like, "Fuck it, we'll put them up for sale, see what happens." Sold out of those in like 15 minutes, which again surprised me. And then I kind of put it out there, and I was like, "Hey, were you guys interested in a pre-order?" And they were like, "Yeah, let's do it." So I was like, "Okay, we'll run a pre-order." Less than 24 hours, we sold over 150 units, and I had no idea about larger scale skateboard production. So I was like, I paused pre-orders and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna figure this out." Figured it out, and that was the beginning of Raid SB. It was kind of an accident, I did have like a logo and branding, kind of an idea of what I was gonna do, but I didn't have anything formalized. I didn't have an Instagram or an email account yet. So started all those things, came on full time to All Skill No Luck in 2020, and then Aaron and I merged brands, or we merged our companies together to be under one umbrella corporation, and so All Skill No Luck and Rate SB now fall under those. And we have a coffee company called STFU Coffee, um, which was an interesting adventure because we it took a long time to get them to let us trademark "shut the fuck up" coffee, and we don't do much with it, but it was a fun idea that we had, and it exists. It's there. People can order coffee. The coffee's decent, but that's just kind of another thing that we do. But it's not like super serious as much as All Skill No Luck and Rate SB is. But that's kind of the quick and dirty of the genesis.
Yeah, so within the contracting world, it reminds me of sort of this strange rule about it, and it seems that those who are in want to get out, and those who are out want to get in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, and for as far as culture goes, for the most part, I believe that I think within a sense of relativity, the reputation, understanding, and an idea of what people think of when they think of contracting has changed a lot in the last 7 years.
Oh yeah. Well, even the
What?
last 15 years.
Yeah, if it yeah, I mean, I don't even have the material to talk about that as far
Mhm.
as what was private contracting like in 2000. Well, let's see, 15 years ago it had been 2007.
Mhm.
I know people who were doing it back then.
Mhm.
I don't know if that was in any way, shape, or form your timeline, but I was 17. I was a kid, so
I
I
was
had.
I was let's see, 2007. I was active duty. I was at my first DSF unit in Georgia, about to come back to San Diego to what's now MSRT West. So I wasn't contracting then, um, but I knew people that I gotten out in contracting, and I think a lot of guys, especially when I got into teaching, because the company I like did contracting for, but they also had a program that people could come and learn the skill sets to get into that space. And but I knew people that were in it back then, and a lot of people going forward, even 5 years later in 2012 and whatnot, they had this idea that contracting was still Baghdad, Blackwater, 2003, 2004, where it's just like, yeah, throw a fucking 240 in the back of a Yukon and we're gonna go do stuff. Like it's not, it hasn't been
Mm.
like that forever, you know. And that was a very rare kind of unique circumstance for what was going on at the time, you know. And everybody thinks it's like, oh, we're just gonna go and play soft and, you know, just be cowboys, and that's not how it is remotely
N-
at all, you know.
No, no, I don't. Maybe it was fortunate in my account, but I never really was in. I was never introduced to the idea that like the private contracting world was cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
My first experiences and understandings of it were very much so later in the progression, and so it was quite professional. And then I've read a couple. Of course, you're going to read a couple books about it,
Mm-hmm.
but like whether or not it's the best or the worst possible choice, it was like even Eric Prince's book on civilian soldiers, I think he calls it
Yeah.
civilian warriors. Sorry about that one, not the National Guard, but it's a good thing. It was an interesting time because I spent some time overseas contracting as well, but not so much on the training side, more on the operations or security side.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I did not know that you are like a flower that keeps getting
I
bigger,
was
and I
like, you know, well, man, I'm jack of all trades, master of none.
fair. Well, if that, I mean, that being the case, so I did not grow up skateboarding because I lived on a dirt road and didn't prioritize it. But what I thought of, and when you were talking about that is what kind of stood out as far as cultural relevance is that again, this allure of the contracting world sort of gets lost once you've been doing it for a while, and it does have a toll on your time, and you're away from people. And I think sometimes it seems to, or oftentimes, if not always, it ends up asking the question of what for.
Mm-hmm.
Like what for? Like if you get to go overseas and live your dream job and make a bunch of money, and then you come home for a couple weeks and you never get to see your family. Um, it really does raise the question of like what is it all for? And hearing a story where you figured it out essentially to try to get out of that cycle. um I think it's just an interesting one. I don't know how to say it I don't know how to say it in any other way yet because it's just on the tip of my tongue. But so going from I don't think if you were to say in 2017 that that we're going to go from private contracting with all of its money to like a skateboard designer
Mm-hmm.
is like anything anyone would expect, right? It's a very unexpected piece. But what was the history of like skateboarding within what was that like for you as far as like through military career or otherwise or before? How did that even work? Like what was the culture of skateboarding when you were younger, and how did that translate into today?
Yeah. So I've always had a skateboard most of my life. You know, I've always had a skateboard as far as back as I can remember. My first skateboard was an OG Christian Asoy Rising Sun deck, white background, red sun with the kind of yellowish green letters. Chad Muska for the skaters. He parodied that deck later on in the '90s with shorties. So I've always had a skateboard. And when I moved around a lot as a kid. We lived in the Midwest for a little bit. I'm originally from San Diego. I lived in Virginia, came back to San Diego when I was about 14, 15. And it was rad because back then, like in the late 90s, skateboarding was everywhere in America. However, depending on where you were, it was either looked at as like you're an outcast, kind of like how people viewed punk rock or any other kind of alternative culture, or if you're somewhere like San Diego, Philadelphia, parts of New York, then it was like welcome home kind of thing. Like there's a community here of skateboarders. Living in the Midwest, there was I knew a couple kids that had skateboards, but nobody was like trying to do anything with it. Like nobody was like trying to like learn hard tricks or talked about being sponsored or trying to, like, oh, one day I'm going to be a pro. Nobody was doing that until I came back to San Diego. And that really motivated me even more because I was motivated by myself. But now I'm surrounded by people that are skating with me and we're pushing each other and there's this progression and all these things that are happening that I can look back and understand why I loved it. and what pushed me. But back then, 15, 16-year-old kid, I don't understand this. I just know that I enjoy it, and so just kept pushing. And then I joined the military, joined the Coast Guard, went to boot camp. My first duty station was in Alaska on a cutter that's we would patrol the maritime boundary line between Russia and the U.S. and do primarily fisheries enforcement, but also search and rescue. So I volunteered to be one of our surface swimmers on the ship. And whenever we when I got to the unit, I reported. We got underway the next day, and I knew that was happening, so I deliberately reported 2 days early so that I could get underway with the ship because I was all moto and gung ho, and so I didn't have any time to explore the town. We come back, and I made friends with one of the guys on the ship, and he grew up rollerblading. He's from the Pacific Northwest, and I asked him, "It's like there's a skate shop in town?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, there actually is." So we went, and it wasn't a skate shop at all. It was like this little shack that had a bunch of sporting goods stuff in it, and he just happened to have skateboards. But what was rad is the skateboards that he had were legit. Like, I think I picked up a Shorty's deck with independent trucks and Black Panther bearings, like all the stuff that I absolutely love to have, like all the good brand shit. So I was stoked. And then at the community center, they had this they had a double mini ramp, so it was like back to back, and but it was all made of like this weird sheet metal because the island I lived on was basically a temperate rainforest, and it was wet all the time. So we would go out to this skate ramp with a squeegee and towels and dry it off because it was always wet. Doesn't matter if the sun was out or not; it was always wet. So we dry it off and we skate. We just skate, and it was rad because if I didn't have him and I didn't have that place to skate, I don't know if I would have continued skating like I did through that part of my life. And then after I went to A school, went to one of the first Miss teams, then was on a tactical boat crew, all that other stuff. But I started meeting other people in the community that skated, and so now I had friends that were skating. They were from all different parts of the world. And as time went on, I would meet more and more people and ended up back in San Diego and would continue to skate. And then I got out and went to school and did the college thing for a little bit while I was still kind of contracting here and there. Finished that and started full time contracting and training and all these other things. And I was still meeting people that skated, but I was almost exclusively surrounded by military or former military people. And I like noticed this pattern. Like, there's a lot of people within the military and community that skate, but we have no representation there. And I was like, that'd be cool to have, like, this is, over 10 years ago. I'm thinking like it'd be cool to have a skate company or at least a skateboard design that would reflect things that we're interested in. And start making some really good friends, guys that are part of the REDACTED family now. We were having these conversations, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, you know, I remember being deployed and talking to the homies on the team, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to get back home. I'm gonna go surf. I'm gonna go skate. I'm gonna go do these things." And we just kind of that helped develop the idea of what REDACTED is to a community of people that are there for each other, and that see skateboarding as a positive outlet for you know anything, but trying to narrow the focus down. And we'll say, okay, it's a positive outlet for mental health, right? Like, get on a skateboard, whether you're just banging down the boardwalk or you're at the skate park trying to do stuff, you can clear your mind because you have to focus on what you're doing at this moment. So any stress, any worries, any negative things that you have going on can dissipate for an hour, 2, 3, 4, however long you're out there for. And then there's tons of studies already been done about physical fitness and physical activity and mental health. Now, just replace weight training, running, hiking, whatever with skateboarding, and it's all relevant. And so that was kind of like the genesis, to where we are today with the whole skateboarding thing. I mean, it was an important part of my life, and I figured if it's an important part of my life, there's other people that it'll be an important part of their life. And if I have these ideas of like it'd be cool to see some kind of military or veteran or even Second Amendment community representation in skateboarding, why not? Everybody has this assumption that, oh, you're skateboarding, you're just this liberal, blah, 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 whatever, and that's not the case. It's just as diverse as anything else is.
Yeah, so it's also just a topic of interest that like I'm very very new at skateboarding. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've had a board for about a year and a half or 2 years now, but I've not. I have foolishly not. Ooh, we lost you. Bum,
There we
bum,
go.
bum. There
Sorry.
we go.
I have no idea what happened. My phone just reset or refreshed and went nuts.
Denied. No,
You're not doing
so
it.
yeah, so as I was saying, like I've had a skateboard for about 2 years now. I've really enjoyed the, as you're calling it, like more of the black cruising around and enjoying
Mhm,
just kind of figuring stuff out. The physicality of it, of course, I'm in my 30s, and so it's kind of an old man, young man thing.
mhm,
But it did bring out a little bit of that feeling of like some of the euphoria that comes out of childhood of that, like I'm
mhm,
just gonna learn how to do this. Like it's just a new thing, something very, very different than the other things that I've learned how to do, and I have enjoyed that one. But as far as I think the thing that did actually attract me the most, and this in some cases might actually qualify me as the least desirable in that form of community, is that like it was actually the culture that I found more interesting.
mhm,
The people that I knew, there were people that I had come to know who I respected, who were all like prior skateboarding, still skateboarding kind of people, and I was like, I guess to say that I was influenced by them is, to those who know me, stating a little bit of the obvious.
mhm.
But and so like I do appreciate that sense of it, especially as like gun culture at the time, because when you guys came around, you said Raid SB came out in like
Like
2019.
2019, yeah.
Yeah, and that was such an odd moment because I had kind of pulled out of gun culture for a while, and it seemed like we lost you again. No. Is it overheating? Then we
I
have
don't
to
know
do
what
the
the hell's happening with this thing.
technology is going to be painful, but hey, let no one fear.
True that.
We'll have a little bit of elevator music just to kind of to bring it along. But yeah, so like when I want to say the community, I think it's I think sometimes gun culture can approach this idea of community culture or being connected to each other with a sense of skepticism and even a little bit of cynicism that maybe is a little misplaced. It's this
Mhm,
idea, like whether it's the relic of the lone wolf or whatever, that, or the relic of the lone wolf kind of mentality that sort of sticks every once in a while, or this feeling of being isolated, or these various issues. And quite frankly, maybe the challenge is, hey, we're not the first community, we're not the first people that have gone from being fractured and fragmented to trying to find something to spend your time around. And the way that you were describing it, as far as nationally, as
mhm.
you're traveling around the country, you said you were moving around a whole bunch, and like different areas viewed it differently, whether New York or San Diego was like welcome home, or places in the Midwest were a little like that's not practical. uh
Yeah.
and and um and I think gun culture can kind of learn from that. I think we can learn. I think we are learning from it. Actually, to be honest, I don't think we
Mhm.
can. I think we have already, and that's and learn from it in that way where like if you do something enough times, you start learning it without being cognitive of it. And that was I think that's an interesting influence that I think is worth value, or that has value for our community as well.
Yeah,
I know that
absolutely.
that can sound a little stale. Like I think it really can sound a little stale in the sense of, oh, our community, collaborative, blah blah blah. But this is kind of bummer. We keep losing him. Hmm. Does it go down? Does it by chance go down when you get like a message or a
No,
text or
I
something?
have do not disturb on right now. It's just like it's almost as if it's refreshing on its own, and I don't understand why.
Hmm.
It's really strange.
It's
I'm
really. We'll try to. We'll try to. We'll try to. We'll work through it. We'll make it
okay.
happen.
Yeah, no, I'm hell bound getting this getting this done.
And be the case, I know we're gonna have to kind of cut over this one, but you will be invited back on, whether or
Oh,
not
I
this
appreciate
happens.
it.
Not if for whatever reason this turns into like it just isn't working, we will figure out a new time and we'll do it, because I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a while.
Yeah, and I'll make sure I have much better my equipment. I will test it multiple times prior to than what I had today because I'm not using anything that I normally would use.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We go through this stuff all the time. It's just
Right.
sometimes some people have it. It just it. Dude, this is the best story, right? So, and then we'll get back into the to the meat and potatoes. As far as it comes to crashing, the be, the most like catastrophic failure that's happened during the lifetime of this show is Nathan Spearing was on, and the internet of the city that I live in went out.
Oh my God.
It was just like for like 2 hours, the
Oh,
entire like
no.
the entire ISP was like, yeah, we're not working for a while, and you're like, oh
Wow.
well, thanks. I scheduled this time with this guy to come on the show, and he comes on, and then like the internet dies, and you're like, you're not
Oh.
trustworthy anymore.
Yeah.
So we're back though.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So so you're saying that even before, yeah, before like 2009, let's just say in 2019, 2020, it was popular to do like it was becoming popular in the gun culture to do the skateboarding thing. It had
Hmm.
long been around. I'm not surprised by that in the slightest. I mean, that's just kind of the way things that go. Um, but yeah, so you guys have then now moved on. We've done a design with you. We did our charity board earlier this year, which was fantastic.
Yep.
But then you've also started like your I guess your boards are a little iconic now. You have a certain colorway, almost like a little bit of a vaporwave going on oftentimes, and then
Yeah.
it's
We like bright
so,
colors.
yeah, and something really distinct, whether it's a Maxim Defense firearm or like just your Mark 18 as hell.
Hmm. Yeah. No, we, that was, the original idea was like, I, the first couple iterations of designs before I settled on the Mark 18, and that actually wasn't even my original choice. I was going to do a, Mark 17 design that I just happened to like it, but then I was like, I just didn't feel right for me. And I did have the Mark 18 done, and I was talking to some of my buddies and stuff, and they were like, "Well, like trying to help me figure it out." And finally, Aaron was like, "Bro, you the Mark 18 was that's what you carry. That was your issued weapon. Like, why are you not doing that?" And I was like, "You're fucking right, bro. What am I thinking with myself?" So that's what we did, and I didn't want to do just like dark, kind of moody, whatever was trendy at the time. I was like, I like bright colors. I have a degree in graphic design and I absolutely love designing with like bright colors and just like pushing things and just doing something different. And so that's what we did. That's what I was like. We're gonna make this different. It's okay to be a cool guy, but have hot pink skateboards and neon blue, whatever. Like that is okay to do. There's no rules that says this is not this isn't allowed or whatever.
Yeah, so I fit in the opposite of that one. I like
Mhm.
the dark colors.
Yeah. I well
But I
here's
mean,
the funny thing. All my clothes, black t-shirts, gray, maybe like I have a red flannel that I mean it's one of ours, but I mean that's like if you look at my closet, my wardrobe, it's like black, gray, and white. That's super monotone, duotone kind of thing. But when it
yep.
comes to like when I design things, I like to use bright colors.
Yeah, it does it adds that flair, and
Hmm.
I'm here for it. So that's good. What about all skill no luck? How did that come about?
So the whole idea with All Skill No Luck, Aaron started it. He calls me up one day. This is early 2015, and he's like, "Hey, Chucky, I need some help." And I was like, "What's going on, buddy?" He's like, "Meet me at the range. Um, we're gonna shoot some content for this new flannel." And he's trying to describe it to me, and I think I understand, but I'm not 100% sure I do. He's like, "Yeah, dude, it's gonna be cool. I got this idea. We're gonna make a flannel that's like the combat frog top, but it's made of flannel instead of ripstop, and it's gonna be a flannel pattern instead of camouflage." And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, man, it's you'll see, it'll make sense. And the whole idea was to take military inspired equipment, uniform items, things like that, and create something that can cross over into the power sports industry for motorcycle riders, dirt bikers, things like that. And the idea with the flagship product of All Skin No Luck, which was the Inchwai de Mela, nobody can pronounce it. I can barely spell it. Like, and so
The
that was
the the purpose of this podcast is complete. We can shut it down now. The Inchwai de Mela.
that's how you pronounce it, Inchwai de Mela. So that was that was the flagship product, and it was the two-piece, you know, removable vest flannel with the shoulder pockets and all that stuff. And I saw like, dude, this is rad. This is super cool. So we shot a little sizzle reel of it. The very first shirt was designed and patterned on the living room floor, cut there, and then sewn in a garage. And for like the first maybe year, that's how production was ran until we got a warehouse, and then able to set up a sewing facility. And so yeah, I mean, that's like the very humble roots of it. And then from there we just kind of started expanding and coming up with ideas and talking to people and thinking of stuff. And so, you know, I'll have an idea of something and I'll send it to Aaron, like, hey, here's my idea. And he'll be like, dude, that's crazy. Let's do it. You know, and he does the same thing. When the FS pack, when he came, when that was getting, we were working on that. Aaron calls me, goes, dude, I got an idea for a fanny pack that turns into a backpack. I'm like, how the hell are you going to turn a fanny pack into a backpack? He goes, it's easy, watch. So I drive him to our shop and he shows me. I'm like, dude, this is brilliant. This is sick, you know? And so it's just been like one thing after another. And the whole idea is like, we don't give a shit what anybody else is doing. Like, I don't care, you know, do your thing. That's awesome. I'm stoked to see people make things, but we're only interested in making things that pique our interest. You know, we're only going to make things that we would wear or we would want to use. We're not interested. Like we could jump on the trend and say, okay, this is a popular product item, and we might be able to even make it better. At the very least, we can make it a U.S. made, American made version of it, because we do all our stuff, cutting, sewing, all that's done in house, and we always, if available, buy U.S. made materials. There's just some things that nobody makes in the U.S., like the Cordura combat wool, for example. It's only made by 4 mills in the world. 3 are in Asia. And so when we got our combat wool, we got it from Germany because we refuse to do business in China. So, you know, we do American made as much as possible, and we can improve on things. But if it's something that we don't see, like, I'm never going to use this, Aaron's never going to use this, or it's something we like, that's not really something I would wear either, we're not interested in making that. You know, we get people all the time to say, hey, you guys should make this, you guys should make that. But, and it's no, like, I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful to anybody, but I'm not interested in that product, you know? And if I'm not interested in it, then I'm not going to put 100% effort into development and marketing and all these other things to share it with everybody else. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We're creative dudes that just want to share ideas with other people, you know?
Very much so. Yeah, you know, you'll look at like the clothing trend of the flannel, and it really,
Mm-hmm.
when did it really start coming out? In like 2012, 2011,
Yeah,
where it was
I mean,
like the idea of the flannel like started suddenly, the idea of the lumber sexual, and like, you know, you
yeah,
had all these city boys and
yeah, all these people wearing flannels and, you know, bootcut jeans with their, you know, Red Wing boots and stuff, and you're like, oh sweet, like, you work in construction, or you lumber? You're like, no man, I'm working at Starbucks. You know? So
yeah, no, I have all those, and I run a podcast, so like
yeah, there you go.
just no, dude, I'm just an art student over at Berkeley. You know, whatever. I know that's an insulting phrase, but because and the best part is like I fit into that category for a while, like even then. But you know, and this is kind of an interesting thing that this is going to be a stretch for some people, but you know, there's this idea that gets brought up all the time in that brought up quite frequently, and perhaps it's a little bit of a vestige of an older idea, but that is that like the currently the West America is in decline,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of comes back with a vengeance every couple of months, years, weeks, whatever it is, depending on your circle. But I think it can also be just. I think we could use this. I know this is going to be a stretch, but bear with me, please. Uh is that I remember when the whole like the flannel thing started coming out, and I was definitely into it because
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, okay, you know what, I it kind of I was in the Midwest, that was kind of a normal thing. I wasn't really in the lumberjack stuff, but I also grew up in more of a rural part of town, and you started seeing it appear whether in like whether in video games like The Last of Us, or in, you know, in some of that like military-ish contractor kind of culture of like, you know, he's probably got tan pants that don't have cargo pants or cargo pockets,
Mm-hmm.
but he's probably wearing a flannel. The dude's built, got tattoos, you know, guilty. And then, you know, and it's like, oh, that was kind of an aesthetic that developed, and you saw it across the culture, across the country. And so like things rise and fall when it comes to trends. Before, and this is like before even like skinny jeans became a thing, but whatever, and I know we're talking about fashion on a supposedly philosophy podcast, but again, aesthetics, or bear with me a little bit. But I remember when like I was getting out of the military right around the 2013 time frame, starting up the contracting gig, and I remember that I could go into an REI and I could find good shirts, like
Mm-hmm.
good flannel shirts that would last me 1 or 2 years, maybe three. Sometimes they weren't even like flannel materials. Sometimes they were just cotton. And there were various companies that were popular at the time, but their construction was moderately solid. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't blowing apart every other week. They all had buttons. The buttons usually stayed on the shirt, and so this was like neat stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
would, I would eventually wear through a shirt, but it would take a couple of years. But then, like by 2015, even into 16, well, no, not 15, but like by 16 into 17, maybe even all the way into 18, I started noticing that like the general quality of them just plummeted.
Mm-hmm.
And it was weird because I could say this like across the platform. You had this burst in, like, let's call it a renaissance
Mm-hmm.
in functional fashion, whatever that meant. It's people were kind of moving away from society was kind of moving away, at least within this element of the fashion industry, especially regarding men, away from like fast fashion disposable materials to something that was a little bit more like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy a jacket that I'm going to hold on to for 10 years. I'm going to buy
Right.
the 10-year hoodie through Filson, and I think that was Filson who did it, whatever. And this was all neat, it's all neat. But then it's like 4 or 5 years later, it just kind of like saturated the market, and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper versions of these flannels were coming out. And by the time maybe 18 was rolling around, they weren't even worth purchasing anymore. Some of them, some of those companies just chose cheaper product, I guess. I don't really have a solid answer on it. um and like buttons were being replaced with snaps
Mm-hmm.
and all this other kind of stuff. And so the reason why I bring this story up, as far as is sort of a parallel, is it's when you look at culture itself,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at a country's stability and a culture, like, you might have a burst in foundation, right? This renaissance of sorts. And we've seen this take place in history before. We've
Mm-hmm.
seen it happen in different eras and areas, and then it creates sort of this white hot center of, not even community, but this like sort of return to values and something of precedence, something of substance. Let's call it substance.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think many of us are even looking for today. But over time, it kind of starts to fall apart, and or it kind of fades into, like, like whatever. And maybe you can make a reference to like the MCU. Like, I'm not big on movies, and I've never been a Marvel person, but like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or whatever is like, it had its like big beginning, and now it's just a shell of its former self.
Oh
Or
yeah.
like Star Wars might be another, two great Disney platforms, might be suffering from some of the similarities. Like, people might remember the value of its core, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever it's creating now doesn't seem to reflect what its original values were. And so, so as far as like going back to this idea of a well-made piece of equipment, is is that, I think, this doesn't need to sound too crazy, but it only really takes one person to stand in the wake of what's going on and say, I'm not going to follow through. I'm not going to follow along with the cheaper degradation of my culture and society. I'm going to stand here and say no.
Yeah, and
uh
that's something that we've been super hard on. Not well, okay. So internally, we've been very rigid about this, and we have conversations all the time, and we've talked about this a lot. And admittedly, I we haven't done a good job, and I that's mostly my fault too, of pushing that same narrative publicly. And the reason why is because I'm a big believer in unconditional liberty, right? Like I don't think that, like, I think if, as long as you're not hurting anybody, like, free to do whatever you want, like, be you. Don't deliberately hurt anybody, or don't do anything that could, in any way, shape, or form hurt somebody. And I don't mean like necessarily physically. It could be emotionally, financially, psychologically, whatever. Don't cause others harm, and live your life and do what you want. And so part of me is like, I want to call out a lot of these organizations, people, and companies that are sitting there like, America, pro this, blah, blah, blah. But yet they go and buy products from a Chinese factory that they don't design the patterns. They don't, they don't know what the material is. They're just kind of told, like, this is what it is. They have no control over QC. They have no control over construction. They have no control over anything other than this is what color it's going to be. And they pay, literally $4 or $5 a unit for these products. They'll buy a few thousand units, turn around and sell them for $60, $70. And, I'm all about capitalism and people making their money, like, no beef with that. But don't sit here and try and preach this pro America, we support the troops bullshit, when you're literally deliberately handing money over to an adversary nation, that does control that business that you're working with there. Like, it's just, the lack of integrity within the industry is extremely frustrating. And I, talk to people, and when they find out, like, we this isn't some bullshit. We're not just like pretending that we make everything in house. We do. That's why it takes us, 6 weeks to fulfill a pre-order, because we literally sew every piece ourselves. I can't sew, but we have sewers that work for us at our shop in Oceanside, California, that make every single piece that we put out. We QC every single piece that we put out. We have that kind of control over it. Is our stuff more expensive? Absolutely it is. But we've been able to stay in business this long, so we're doing something. There's a market there. And so people use the excuse, well, it's just so expensive to do business in America. It is very expensive to do business here. Probably the vast majority of our overhead goes to different forms of state insurance and taxes and federal taxes. Like, that's the vast majority of our overhead. And but we managed to, continue doing our thing. So the excuse that it can't be done because it's too expensive is absolute nonsense. You got two guys, and we're, idiots in the grand scheme of things, that have managed to figure this out. People that are far more business savvy than we are can figure it out as well. Look at Origin's a prime example. People much smarter than us have been able to do it in North Carolina and Philly and or Pennsylvania area, and they're crushing it. And we are so stoked to see that, because we look at them as like, yeah, see, this is where we need to go with American manufacturing. This is how it should be. We're trying to push ourselves and grow to that point as well. But all these other guys, I mean, in my opinion, it's pure lack of integrity. You can't sit here and preach America first when you're putting, your money elsewhere, kind of thing.
It's so let's kind of break that part down a little bit, especially that since you're coming from the manufacturing side. How difficult was it for you? How would you trace the process that you went through to try to go from nothing to sourcing materials, building a design, figuring out people to do the sewing, and or doing it yourself, even how, like, because I think one of the issues that we run into, and the reason one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, it maybe if this is a window that will be great for you to kind of illuminate for us for the first half of the show. We got about 10 minutes to kind of, maybe if you need more, we'll pick it up again in the second half. But I think one of the issues that, let me just put it clear, that
Mm-hmm.
we deal with is, the idea seems so daunting,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It is.
Like, okay, well, I want to make a shirt. Well, how do I make a shirt?
Yeah.
Well, you need to find fabric, you need to find a pattern, you need to find someone to sew it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean,
It is.
illiterate people have figured that out, but
Yeah.
now I need to be able to figure out how to make a profit, and I need to have
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And so, like, and it's and maybe China or maybe overseas manufacturing has done a really good job creating a sort of solution to that.
Oh, absolutely.
But
They
I
absolutely.
but like, an alternative is a value. How would you advise somebody if somebody was saying, like, they came to you with a design that
Mm-hmm.
fit a similar concept to what you guys were working on? not like a competitor, but how what? But they were saying, I don't know how would I bring this to life?
Yeah.
Well,
No,
how would you start recommending them?
so I personally, I don't view anybody necessarily as a competitor. And that's not coming from a place of arrogance. Like there's nobody that can compete with us. The way I look at it is like this is that, and I'll elaborate more on this in just a second. Um, when I look into my closet, when anybody looks into their closet, for the vast majority of people, there's not just one brand of product in there, right? There's, you have different things for different, situations. It's just like, tailor the gear to the mission kind of thing, right? So I don't see like any other, like, I don't look at Origin as like they're a competitor of mine. I look at Origin as like we're on the same team doing this, with the same mission. And we're supplying different things to people that are, that want those kind of products. So I'm happy to help. And I have helped as, anybody who's ever come and asked me about production or anything like that, because there's two big factors into it. One, are they going to even execute? They may or may not. That's, I can't make somebody execute. And two, their ideas are not my ideas. My ideas are my ideas and their ideas are their ideas. And if their idea, if they have an idea that's similar to mine, but it's better, then absolutely they should win. That, if there is some kind of competition, then they should win that, if they're a better product, plain and simple. But the whole thing, it's super daunting. I had a vague idea of like sewing production for a brief time. I was the director of design and prototype and product development for another gear manufacturer in San Diego. So I understood how to build um, patterns and design product, but I don't know how to sew. And so I had to, I still don't know how to sew. So we had to figure that thing out. Luckily, with our network that we had, we were able to kind of pull things from other areas and people that we knew and say, hey, do you know somebody that can help us do this, this, and this? And we asked questions. We researched and we asked questions. I mean, it's a lot. It was a lot of work initially to figure out, how do we do this? And we had to pick the brains of people that have done it before us. And so we just would cold call or cold email or cold message and be like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Are you down to meet up with me for coffee? I'll buy you lunch. I just want to pick your brain for a little bit, and so we did those things, and then we learned like, okay, if we're going to sew something, we need a specific machine that does this, and then for another process of this garment creation, we need another machine that does this, and then we had to just kind of go down the line and figure things out as we go. We tried shopping different production facilities in LA. We drove up to LA one day like super early in the morning and just spent like almost our entire day in South Central in the industrial areas, going to all these different OEM manufacturers with our sample product that we had, going, how do we make this with you guys? And they're like, well, we got to do this. We got to do this. So we're taking notes, and we were down to outsource the entire production to somebody in LA. The problem was nobody wanted to do it. They were charging us ridiculous amounts of money for just a counter sample production run to pattern this thing. And I understood what they were doing right away, because something that I would do, or I used to do when I was doing freelance design. If there was a project someone brought to me and I didn't want to do it, or I felt like they were going to be a difficult client, I would charge them like triple what I should for that project because I didn't want to do it. But if they're willing to pay it, I'll do it. And so that's what they were doing to us. And so we're like, okay, that's not going to work. We're not going to China. So how do we do this? And it was just, we found we got a hold of who's our production manager now. He was the lead sewer and production manager of the other company that Aaron and I both worked at. And we're like, more, the sewing part. We have ideas. Help us figure this out. And he was like, okay. And so we got together, and that's what we started doing. We're like, luckily for us, this guy is he is an amazing sewer. I can bring him a product and say, like, I can bring him a backpack and go, hey, sir, I want to do this backpack, but I want to change these things, and I want it to have this material, and I want it to do, this kind of zipper. And he'll look at it and go, okay. And he can make me an 80% solution without ever taking that thing apart. He's an amazing sewer. Like, he is the backbone of All Skill No Luck, 100%. And so, having him is a huge benefit, but everything else was just trial and error and research. We had to figure out, like, learn the hard way multiple times. Like, you can't just mix any type of material together. Like, I can't just put,
one type of material as a sleeve on another type of torso portion that, or another on a torso portion that's a different type of material. Like there has to be some kind of continuity between them, whether it's the material types, the fabric weight, how much it stretches, how much elastics in it, whatever. Like there's these rules kind of that you have to follow in order for your stuff to last. You can mix things and it'll hold for a time, but it's not going to be as high quality or durable as it would be if you did it the proper way, the correct way. So it was all trial and error. We got turned down by big manufacturers in LA. There was nobody out here that wanted to do it. So we just said, screw it, we'll do it ourselves. And we just kind of started like literally on the living room floor. Our production guy, he showed us like, this is how we're going to make patterns. And so we would literally take things apart, like get the seams, de-seam everything, and lay out sections of these panels basically of a garment, trace it out, and then modify it however we wanted. Then I would go into Illustrator and I would make a digital render of that so that we could print out. It's basically, it's called a tech pack. It has like all the scaling for sizes and all this other stuff. And, and just kind of cold calling, researching and figuring it out, trial and error. That's the way we did it. And so now when people come to me and go, hey, Chuck, I got this idea. I want to do this, this, and this. How do I do that? I go, cool, man. Here's what I would do based on what I understand you're asking me. And I'm not going to make somebody go through the mistakes that I made. Like if I can teach them something, I'm happy to do so. Happy to share that information with them, And so I do.
For sure. It helps out a bunch too. I think it helps out a bunch in the sense that I'm hoping that somebody who's listening to this who has an idea, who's been trying to figure out maybe, and I'm assuming that that person who's listening has been considering it for some time, and is looking for that one little bit on how to move it on to the next phase.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, I disagree with the gun culture. What do you call it? The gun culture status quo
Oh
that
yeah.
of it's not even the yeah, maybe the
It's like
status
a
quo.
gatekeeping kind of.
No, it's the word I'm looking for is you hear it all the time is there's no innovation in gun culture. And
Oh
it's like no, there is. You're just not seeing it.
yeah.
And it's just not the innovation that's catching your interest.
Mm-hmm.
Um and in innovation is kind of like a violent revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's gradually then suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got to be alive and you were invested into gun culture in say 2014 when or 2011 or whatever, when AR-15s are blowing up into the market and polymer handled striker fire handguns are becoming the new norm. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of innovation that went along in that time. It wasn't pretty.
Yeah, no, not at all.
But and then for a while it's gonna stagnate for a bit, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna create the fertile pond, the petri dish of sorts that's going to cause something else to rise out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the kind of cynical throwing up your hands, there's no innovation in gun culture mentality, um though it may be frustrating to see, as in like I expected you to do so much better kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's temporary.
it is.
It comes and goes. Let it pass kind of thing. So that's neat. Um the most passive way. Well, that's neat.
That's
So you're saying, so like you had a little bit of experience because you were working for another manufacturer,
mm-hmm.
then and later on you had to figure it out yourself. Just because you're working there doesn't mean that knowledge was just like downloaded into your brain.
Absolutely not. Yeah, because the company that I was working for before, they did have some of their own products, um, but it was mostly OEM for other companies, and they already had internal designers, internal like pattern makers and stuff like that. So they just sent us stuff for production. So when it came to the development stuff, I figured out a lot of things there because of projects that I was working on. I developed a plate carrier for another company that's out on the market now, and some other things. And so like again, it was all just, even at that point, it was trial and error. Like some of the things made sense because I understood gear, I used the gear, and I knew how to design, I knew how to do design graphics, and I did take a couple courses of like drafting and design for building for like buildings and stuff like that in college, but I was never like going in that direction. So, but I understood the principles of like in terms of considerations, like okay, if I'm going to do this, it's like building, you know, a house, right? I got to make sure that when I'm framing this, that I have my stud gaps are correct, that you know, I'm using the correct materials in the correct spots with the correct anchors and, you know, fasteners and things like that. So clothing's no different. You just got to understand how it goes together. You know what I mean? And so I had a little bit of a heads up on that part, but there was still a lot of other things that I had to figure out and learn. Like I didn't realize initially that you needed, you know, 5 different machines to make one type of product, you know, because each machine does something different. You can do a lot of it on one machine, but you waste a lot of time because you have to switch out needles, you have to switch out bobbins, you have to switch out thread, you have to switch out foots, you have to switch out all these different components, where instead of doing that, I can just leave this machine set for this process, execute this process as many times as I need to, and then move it over to the next process, you know. And then when I have to go back for the next size on this process, it's already set and done. So I can just keep going. It's just to maximize efficiency at that point.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. It does. I had one more question that I wanted to finish this first half with, but it seems like it's starting to escape me, which really bothers me.
No, come back.
I know, right? It's like, yeah. I was thinking about it, and then, unfortunately, I stopped thinking about it and started listening to you. It kind of, it's just like, it's the backlash of that old adage, or that old thing of like, well, when you're listening to somebody, if you want to become a good speaker, listen to people talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, okay, I'm listening to, not just to respond. I'm trying to genuinely understand you, and then I'm like, now I don't remember what I was gonna say.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time.
Doesn't
It's like,
that well.
it's like, oh, squirrel.
Gone. All right, so let's do this real quick. We're gonna end up section 1, or part 1 of this conversation. So where do people find you? How does that work out? Like, what's the best way to get a hold of you, man?
Best way to get a hold of us is either on Instagram, any of the social medias, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, All Skill No Luck, or Raid Skateboards. Feel free to send me an email if you want, info@raidsb.com. Or you could go to either website and go to the contact form and send us a direct email, and I'll get those as well. So that's DMs through social media or direct email is the best way to get a hold of me. If you know me personally, you got my phone number, give me a call.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, that with that being the case, this has been part 1 with Chuck Robeson of All Skill No Luck and Raid Skateboards, and we will be back tomorrow for part 2. Well, you guys will be back tomorrow. We're just gonna sit here and start recording section 2. So, thank you very much. This has been the Redacted Culture Cast. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Later.
Keep your Keep your hatchet sharp and your powder dry. The times
Absolutely.
are upon us.